Arise, O compatriot, Nigeria. Far from the land, with love and strength and faith, the laborer, our heroes past shall never be in vain. To serve without a mind, one nation bound in freedom, peace and unity. Let us pray. O God of creation, direct that's right. Help our youth the truth to know, in love and honesty to grow, and living just and true, great lofty heights attain, to build a nation where peace is reign. Please be seated. The Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osibajo, SN, GCON, who will be talking with us later in the course of these proceedings via Zoom from the Villa. Education Minister, Adamu, who is also represented by the Minister of State for Education, Honorable Chukwuemeka Uwajuba. Permanent Secretary, Architect Sanin Echanum. The leadership of Education Committees of the National Assembly, Honorable Commissioners of Education across the Federation, Directors of the Federal Ministry of Education here present, Chief Executives of agencies under the supervision of the Ministry of Education here present, members of the Diplomatic Corps here present, our development partners, the World Bank, the USAID, UNESCO, UNICEF, among others. Eminent resource persons, distinguished and erudite scholars, distinguished invitees, gentlemen of the press. On behalf of the ministers, permanent secretary, management, and staff of the Federal Ministry of Education, as well as our development partners, I extend to you our fraternity greetings and indeed a warm welcome to the 2020 Annual Education Conference. The theme for this year's conference is Building an Effective, Resilient, and Sustainable Education System for Nigeria during and post-COVID-19 pandemic, the way forward. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin with the opening address by Education Minister Adamu. The minister is represented here by the Permanent Secretary, Architect Sanin Echana. The minister.
Your Excellency, the Vice President, Federal Republic of Nigeria, members of the National Assembly here present, and those joining via Zoom, sector, directors of the ministry, honorable commissioners for education and permanent secretaries from the 36 states and the FCT, our distinguished resource persons, discussants, and panelists, all other stakeholders in the education sector, gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Malam Adamu, the Honorable Minister of Education, it is with great respect, privilege, and pleasure that I welcome His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic, Professor Yemi Oshibanjo, GCON, to the 2020 Nigeria's Annual Education Conference. We in the sector are particularly lucky to count the Vice President, the Senate President, and so many other key actors in the Buhari administration as our own. We are also glad that this occasion affords us the opportunity to honor all stakeholders and the children and teachers that constitute the major stakeholders in the sector, and to also remind them that our dear President has demonstrated very graciously his compassion, his concern, and his interest in the welfare of all those playing in that ecosystem. I therefore welcome the members of the National Assembly, the co-founders and partners of this conference, and all the top government officials who are here or joining virtually. I want to particularly welcome our renowned, distinguished lead presenter, Mr. Albert Sengiyumva, who will be joining virtually from his country, but whom we in the sector, especially across Africa, deeply appreciate his contributions. The theme of this year's conference, building on effective, resilient, and sustainable education system for Nigeria during and post-COVID-19 pandemic, a way forward, is germane in view of the prevailing global pandemic and the collective role of stakeholders to ensure and deliver sustainable quality education to our children. Your Excellency and fellow participants, you will kindly recall that on 30th January of 2020, the World Health Organization declared the outbreak of coronavirus 2019, what we now call COVID-19, as a public health emergency of international concern. The Federal Ministry of Health also announced the confirmation of the first case, the index case in Lagos, on the 27th of February 2020, and this led to the emergence of the multi-sectoral coronavirus preparedness group led by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control with its National Emergency Operations Center. The Ministry of Education is a member of the Presidential Task Force. As part of our own response, on March the 19th, 2020, we issued a circular for the closure of all schools with effect from Monday the 23rd of March 2020 to prevent the spread of the virus, and subsequently each state was advised to put in a response team. Unfortunately, the closure of schools affected close to 46 million students throughout the country. There was great concern of the ministry and all stakeholders, especially for the 4.2 million students in the 3 states of Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe, who are already coping with an insurgency, as well as other vulnerable groups of children nationwide. From our records, about 400,000 IDP children learning in the camps and host communities were affected by the closure of schools. And all planned activities for the first and second quarters of 2020 were also interrupted. Indeed, the education sector almost came to an abrupt halt. But mercifully, and in line with the education agenda of Mr. President, an urgent digital innovation solution was considered. And suddenly, or very quickly, e-learning resource platforms were put in place both by the Federal Ministry of Education and in collaboration with various stakeholders. We had our WAEC e-learning portal that was created for the general public, for example. We had WAEC Connect and candidate information portals for all the candidates preparing for the examinations. We had 12 different platforms for pre-basic up to tertiary education. As many as, it started with 5 states, but at the end of it, we had about 21 states that had e-learning platforms, or we are using broadcast media such as radio and TV. Our Unity schools created virtual learning platforms for junior secondary and senior secondary schools. Many of our partners and vendors in the IT space, including Oracle, Cisco, IBM, etc., also created platforms. And we received cooperation for our communications companies from MTN to Glo to Airtel and so on, who even made access to data, to the internet through the use of data free and in some cases at very reduced cost. There are complementary measures from our development partners who also made their educational resources, some even in Nigerian languages, open to us. So distinguished participants, we want to express our profound appreciation for the collective efforts in addressing the challenges posed by the pandemic, and the fact that we have shown tremendous resilience and have adapted effectively to the new normal. We observed that the abrupt nature of the school closures made some teachers in the country who are now expected to deliver online learning deficient, and proper training had to be undertaken, or some form of training to enable them adjust. Course content had to be digitized, and the new delivery mechanisms had to be adopted to ensure that pedagogy and the facilitation take place seamlessly. This has still remained a challenge, and we hope that we will continue to improve through constant training and redevelopment of our existing teachers, as well as introduction of new measures and technology to improve the system. Ladies and gentlemen, there are observed disparities in access to distance learning across countries, and this must be removed to enhance sustainable system of education. At this juncture, let me point out some of the measures we took through the guidelines issued for the reopening of schools and covering 4 thematic areas. We did respond by requesting pupils and teachers to stay in their homes and use technology to ensure that we can deliver learning safely. Before our schools and learning facilities reopened, we issued guidelines to observe what we often call the NCDC COVID-19 guidelines, and dealt with the process during the reopening process, and the conditions that must be maintained in our institutions to ensure safety and also to ensure that learning can take place. We did identify actions and responsibilities to be taken by various stakeholders in areas of policy, financing, safe operations, learning, training, reaching the most marginalized, building back better, safety and hygiene, and infection prevention and control. I am pleased to report that most of these measures have been largely complied with by educational institutions. In the last few days, we have had some unfortunate incidents which were being addressed, particularly in Lagos. But by and large, most of our educational institutions were protected and students were able to continue to learn. We've since reopened, carried out 3 examinations nationwide, and we're in a gradual process of also reopening all the other tiers in our education tree. Let me also point out that in addition to the aforementioned approaches to building an effective, resilient, and sustainable system for Nigeria during the post-COVID, during and after the COVID-19 pandemic, the existing policies, programs, and projects of the ministry will be deployed fully to achieve the sustainable education system for this great country. You will all recall that the ministry developed a strategic plan that was built on 9 pillars and measurable goals that need to be attained. And for each of the pillars, there are clear and well-defined objectives together with the strategies to be employed in achieving them. The following 9 pillars will be used to catalyze the attainment of sustainable education system during and post-COVID-19 periods in Nigeria. Addressing the out-of-school children phenomenon. Strengthening basic and secondary school education. Promoting teacher education, capacity building, and professional development. Adult literacy and special needs education. Special focus on education data planning. Curriculum review and benchmarking minimum academic standards. Focusing sharply on technical and vocational education and training, TVET. Ensuring greater access and improving the quality of higher education and the promotion of digital learning across the country. While acknowledging government's efforts and the progress that is being made at meeting the ever-increasing demand for basic education, our states are urged to make renewed efforts not only to access the UBEC intervention funds put in place for the provision of basic education in their respective states, but also investing in infrastructure, in the hiring of qualified teachers, in the provision of educational materials, and creating the right environment for teaching and learning to take place. More importantly, we are working with the states and the Federal Ministry of Finance to ensure that our teachers are not only paid well, but paid on time. The ministry has, through the Universal Basic Education Commission, allocated funds towards Teacher Professional Development Program, what we call the TPD. The ministry will ensure the success of this program nationwide. The ban on the recruitment of unqualified and unregistered teachers remain in force, and it will further be enforced more vigorously in the months ahead. As you all know, the objective of the TPDP include ensuring that teachers and education managers are exposed to current education policies, management systems, and teaching methodologies. The training needs of each state will be met irrespective of their peculiar nature and through the judicious utilization of resources. We are aware that teacher education is plagued by the continuing shortfall in funding of programs and projects coupled with the need to expand and modernize curricula to ensure that the colleges of education products are able to effectively deliver basic education at pre-primary and primary schools, as well as in adult and non-formal levels. We have directed, through the auspices of the National Economic Council, that the 27.5% teachers' peculiar allowance should be paid by all states of the Federation as approved by the National Council on Education. Furthermore, in our efforts to improve funding for teacher education, the present administration constituted the Teacher Education Development Fund account, the TEDFA, which is dedicated to the execution of the Teacher Education Development Plan. The ministry undertakes to ensure or carry out effective monitoring of the implementation of the NTEP goals and objectives for the development of the teaching profession to build effective and sustainable education system for Nigeria at all times. With regard to the government, in its determination to improve technical and vocational education and training, develop teachers' assessments guide and instructional materials to aid the teaching of the new curriculum in technical and vocational institutions. The ministry has also in place measures to ensure effective use of these materials and to ensure improvements in TVET. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in recognition of the importance of adult and youth literacy to the total development of our nation, the Federal Ministry of Education will ensure prompt of all projects for the ANFE centers across the country to further build an efficient system. The disrupted academic life in a number of our public schools have been greatly curtailed, and we juncture also wish to appreciate the contributions of the Borno State government in providing alternative schools for some of our displaced institutions in Borno State. A coordinated action fully reopen is ongoing. Schools nationwide will be made to be secure and to adopt measures that will maintain a state of alert. Keeping our schools and children safe is one of the key priorities of the present administration. Distinguished participants, the absence of reliable, up-to-date, and credible data has continued to affect our education sector negatively. It has hindered our attempts at effective planning and reporting, as well as measuring progress recorded. So in recognition of the importance of data in school administration and planning, the present administration will ensure adequate funding and support for the National Education Information Management System, the NAEC, to be effective and to deliver on its mandates. The ministry will also scale up its collaboration with international development partners and all the stakeholders in an effective, resilient, and sustainable system. Permit me to emphasize that the education system of any country is too strategic and sensitive to be treated like any other sector. As stakeholders, we must bring to bear great courage and commitment in order to chart a better course for the educational advancement of our beloved country. The time for the change is actually yesterday, and we cannot delay any further. On this note, I must sincerely congratulate all participants at the conference, especially the co-founding partners, for the efforts in putting this conference together to support the federal government to squarely address issues of building an effective, resilient, and sustainable education system for Nigeria during and in the post-COVID-19 pandemic. I hope this conference will generate insightful deliberations that provide solutions and chart the way forward for the sector. Once again, I welcome you all to the 2020 edition of our National Annual Education Conference, and I wish us fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Can we have another round of applause for the Permanent Secretary, Architect Sonny Echanum? Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's time for goodwill messages. We're taking goodwill messages across the sector, across the spectrum. The very first of these goodwill messages is coming. The message is coming from the representative of honorable commissioners across the 36 states of the Federation. We have here the Honorable Commissioner, Plateau State, Elizabeth Wapmotel. Madam, you're welcome to the podium. Because of the cameras, I think it is preferable you come over to the podium. Sorry. Thank you.
The Honorable Minister Ochono, Permanent Secretary, Federal Minister of Education, the Honorable Minister of State for Education, Honorable Chukwuemeka Nwaji Uba, ladies and gentlemen, sir, kindly permit me to stand on the existing protocol. I must thank the Federal Ministry of Education for this conference. The annual conference is apt, considering the COVID-19 that came with challenges, which kept all the sector of the economy on its toes, especially the education sector. The issue of e-learning had to come in so many ways. In many or most schools, we are not ready when the COVID-19 came, especially the public schools. However, with the challenges, I always said opportunities came. And that is why I'm saying the theme for this annual conference is apt. And I know the Federal Ministry of Education is always leading the education sector. And I must say I'm proud since I became a commissioner, and I believe my other commissioners from the other states too must agree that the Federal Ministry of Education has never failed in bringing us along, in taking us along, and giving us the knowledge and the courage to lead in our various states. I am therefore thanking you again for bringing this conference at the appropriate time. I'm saying the theme is apt because we are looking for the way forward. We have to be innovative, especially for the urban and rural pupils and students. When the e-learning came, it was difficult for us, especially at the state level, to go down to the rural areas and effect any e-learning because our schools are still not ICT compliant. The way forward is therefore necessary. On behalf of all the commissioners from the various states of the Federation, I wish to say thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, the Honorable Commissioner for Plateau State, representing commissioners of the 36 states of the Federation. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the next message is coming from the FCDO, via the Development Director, Christopher Pycroft. Christopher Pycroft, can you please give us the goodwill message on behalf of the FCD. Oh, that is Christopher Pycroft. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, all protocol duly observed. Good morning to you all. I'm delighted to be here at the 2020 Nigeria Annual Education Conference hosted by the Federal Ministry of Education. My name is Chris Pycroft and I'm the Development Director for the United Kingdom's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office here in Nigeria. Education is a right and a key priority for the United Kingdom. Education is also fundamental to lasting poverty reduction and to building prosperous, resilient economies and peaceful, stable societies. The UK, through the Education Data and Research Programme, was a founder partner of this conference. And the UK places a high value on using evidence to inform policy dialogue, plan and assess performance. And so we are pleased that this conference is continuing under the stewardship of the Federal Ministry of Education, even in these challenging and exceptional times. Let me start by commending the Federal Ministry of Education, which has organized this conference, and also thanking partners who have actively supported them. This conference is a positive testament to the commitment from the leadership of the Federal Ministry to discuss the evidence of what works to improve educational outcomes for children and young people here in Nigeria. This is particularly important this year. The COVID-19 pandemic has created the largest disruption of education systems in history, affecting nearly 1.6 billion learners in more than 190 countries and all continents. The theme of this year's conference is building an effective, resilient and sustainable education system for Nigeria during the post-COVID-19 pandemic, the way forward. Through UK aid, we are committed to supporting the government of Nigeria to strengthen the education system here in Nigeria. Over the past months, all our education programs have flexed to support the COVID response, supporting home-based and remote learning, as well as the safe return to school. The Global Partnership for Education, to which the UK is one of the largest donors, has also provided support to the sector to mitigate the impacts of school closures on learners and to build the resilience of the education system. Last year, we launched our new education program, Partnerships for Learning for All in Nigeria, a £170 million investment. This program aims to use the best existing local and international evidence to enable more inclusive and effective state and non-state systems to deliver foundational skills to all children. The PLANE program builds on the support that the UK has provided to the education sector in Nigeria for over a decade. Nigeria, like a lot of countries, has expanded access to schooling at an impressive rate in recent times. Unfortunately, however, too many children are leaving primary school without basic numeracy and literacy skills. The impact of COVID-19 and extended school closures will increase many of the challenges already faced by the sector and will have already had an impact on children's learning. Disadvantaged children are the most affected by the crisis because schools are not only places of learning, but also provide social protection, nutrition, health, and emotional support. In order to address these challenges, particularly to improve learning levels, it is important to adopt a holistic approach and to encourage innovation, as new challenges require new solutions. This is why I welcome the focus of the conference on these 4 important sub-themes. First, strengthening the design of curriculum, assessment, and monitoring systems. Secondly, teacher capacity development. Thirdly, strengthening education infrastructure and resources for inclusive access to quality learning. And fourthly, fostering a culture of innovation in education planning during the post-COVID-19 pandemic. For the UK, the support to teachers, as well as the focus on marginalized children, are particularly important. Teaching quality is one of the most important factors affecting learning in schools, but many teachers in Nigeria lack the skills, knowledge, tools, and also the support to teach effectively. We are so pleased that both issues are reflected in the sub-themes of this conference. You'll be hearing over the next 2 days from many experts working in the education field, and we are pleased that our partners from the Partnership to Engage, Reform and Learn, the Pearl program, will also be joining the discussion. We hope that lessons learned from our programs will feed into federal and state level policies and plans to continuously improve education for all the children under their care. Let me once again commend the leadership of the Federal Ministry of Education for this event and for selecting a theme that recognizes the importance of building a stronger educational system. I am sure that the next 2 days will see rich discussions and trust that outcomes of the conference will help determine priorities, support reforms, improve implementation of policy, and monitor our progress. I hope that we continue to see action taken as a result of each annual conference, and we will hold ourselves and each other to account to take forward the recommended actions. Thank you, and let me offer my best wishes for a successful and productive 2-day conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Christopher. Just before we introduce the next speaker, the owner of this car, a Lexus ash-colored car, KJA 218EG, is blocking a very sensitive access somewhere. He should please go and repark the car. Lexus ash-colored, KJA 218EG, please repark your car. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we take in the third goodwill message from the Education Office Director, Dennis Otu, USAID. Mr. Dennis? Is Mr. Dennis with us? Okay, while we wait for Dennis, we will ask the UNESCO Regional Office Director, Mamadou Lamine Sow, for the next goodwill message. Can we put our hands together for Mamadou Lamine Sow, representing UNESCO Regional Office? Bienvenue, Monsieur Lamine.
Merci beaucoup, mon frère. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellency, the Vice President, the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Honorable Minister of Education, the Honorable Minister of State for Education, Honorable Commissioners for Education, the Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Education, Chief Executives of Parastatals, Education Chairman of State Universal Basic Education Nigeria, ladies and gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be called to give this goodwill message on behalf of the United Nations system in Nigeria in this annual education conference on the theme, Building an Effective, Resilient, and Sustainable Education System for Nigeria during and post-COVID-19 pandemic, the way forward. Let me first tell you how important it is for UNESCO to be here. As you all know, UNESCO has the global mandate to lead the implementation and monitoring of SDG 4, which is about providing quality, inclusive education for all and lifelong learning opportunities. And the second thing that I would like to highlight this morning about my presence here, you know that UNESCO lead the preparation of the Global Education Monitoring Report each year that provides important data, information, evidences that stakeholders in the education sector, policymakers use, to plan, budget, and lead the education sector everywhere. As many countries begin a strategic exit from the confinement, institutions, officials, and policymakers are evaluating the full impact of the outbreak on learning. They are also exploring strategies to get back on the pathway to delivering their sustainable development education targets and goals. In line with that, UNESCO, in partnership with other partners, including UNICEF, the World Bank, the World Food Program, developed a global framework for reopening of schools to provide guidance to countries. At the national level, I mean in Nigeria, and within the platform of Education in Emergencies Working Group, UNESCO contributed to the elaboration of similar guidelines for Nigeria. In addition, we, alongside other partners, provided technical support to the Universal Basic Education Commission in articulation of a teacher's handbook on school health and safety to enhance the capacities of teachers and school personnel to prevent and control the spread of the COVID-19 and other infectious diseases in schools. UNESCO is committed to printing 10,000 copies of the handbook to support UBEC in ensuring that as many teachers as possible own a copy. It is gratifying to note that the UN system in Nigeria is committed to supporting the government of Nigeria achieve its plans and aspirations. We will continue to provide support in the implementation of the National Education Sector COVID-19 Response Plan and work together to ensure that SDG 4 is achieved. Your Excellency, Honorable Ministers, distinguished colleagues, UNESCO continues to monitor the impact of the pandemic on education systems across the globe and to play the coordination and monitoring roles on SDG 4. This year, the Global Education Monitoring Reports on Inclusion and Education, All Means All, which will be launched here today, Excellencies, focuses on persons excluded from education because of their identity, background, or ability. The report reminds us of the moral imperative to ensure every child has a right to education of high quality. It explores the challenges hindering inclusion and demonstrates concrete policy examples from countries managing to tackle them with success. Some of the challenges highlighted include differing understanding of the word inclusion, lack of teacher support, absence of data on those included from education, inappropriate infrastructures, persistence of parallel systems and special schools, lack of political will and community support, untargeted finance, uncoordinated governance, multiple but inconsistent laws and policies that are not being followed through. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, permit me to highlight some of the findings of the report regarding Nigeria. Research finding on disability in Nigeria showed that the country has no enrollment data for students with visual impairments. Nigeria's 2017 National Policy on Inclusive Education endorses the UNESCO's definition, calling it the process of addressing all barriers and providing access to quality education to meet the diverse needs of all learners in the same learning environment. The policy tries to provide a unified system for students with disabilities. It plans to realize inclusive education by rehabilitating and upgrading special schools to serve as resource centers, catering for the needs of people with disabilities and training teachers on inclusion. However, more work needs to be done to put this policy into practice. The report notes that there is limited use of assistive hardware and software and that irregular electricity supply hampered the use of available devices. Just 12% of children start school on time having attended pre-primary education. Data is scarce. Education expenditure amounted to 1.7% of GDP and 12.5% of total public expenditure in 2013, well below the estimated regional average and thresholds. Sufficiently, good learning assessment for SDG 4 reporting remain rare in Africa, and there is hardly any data in Nigeria other than UNESCO statistical institutes. The report provides some recommendations for countries to address their identified gaps. They include the following. Widen the understanding of inclusive education. It should include all learners, no matter their identity, background, or ability. Target financing to those left behind. There is no inclusion while millions do not access education. Share expertise and resources. It is the only way to sustain a transition to inclusion. Engage in meaningful consultation with communities and parents. Inclusion cannot be enforced from above. Deliver jointly across government department sectors and tiers. Inclusion in education is but a subset of social inclusion. Make space for non-government across the challenge and fill gaps, but also make sure they work towards the same inclusion goal. Apply universal design, ensure inclusive system, fulfill every learner's potential. Prepare, empower, and motivate the education workforce. All teachers should be prepared to teach all students. Collect data on and for inclusion with attention and respect. Avoid stigmatizing or labeling. Learn from peers. A shift to inclusion is not easy. Your Excellency, the honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen, in inclusion, permit me to call on all key education stakeholders from government, international development partners, civil society organizations, financial partners, and communities to support the call for inclusion in education. All must mean all. No one should be left behind. On this note, Honorable Minister, may I crave your indulgence and request you to launch the 2020 Global Education Monitoring Report on Inclusion in Education All means all. Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lamin. Merci. Okay. 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 Mr. Lamin is now presenting the Global Monitoring Report to the Honorable Minister of State for Education, Honorable Chukwuemeka Uwajuba. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lamin. Bienvenue to Nigeria. We sincerely welcome Mr. Lamin to Nigeria, and we appreciate his sound presentation. And now the presentation to the Minister of State, the Global Monitoring Report. Mr. Lamin.
Honorable Minister of State Education, it is my pleasure to present you with some copies of the Global Education Monitoring Report summary. And you will find key important findings regarding inclusion in education in Nigeria. I hope this tool, strategic instrument, will help you indeed your partners and all education stakeholders in Nigeria make effective decisions to ensure that all children, all meaning all, are not left behind. Thank you, Minister.
That's great.
No, we have the scores now. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lamin. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we now have 3 virtual presentations, and I have the singular honor to invite my co-anchor, Dr. Folake Olatunji Davis, the Director in the Federal Ministry of Education, who doubled as the conference convener, to very, very specially invite the 3 virtual presenters to make their presentation. Dr. Folake.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Bengug. The Honorable Minister, esteemed members of the High Table, distinguished participants. We'll quickly go on to invite the next speaker, in the person of Ms. Denise Uto, who is the USAID Director of Education in Nigeria, to give a goodwill message. Ms. Denise, please. She's doing it virtually. Okay, she's
Yes.
already set. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Folake. Good morning, everyone. Honorable Minister, please allow me to observe all protocols and send regards to you all from Ambassador Leonard and USAID Mission Director Ann Patterson. I am uniquely privileged to be dual-hatted as both the USAID representative as well as the representative of the Education Development Partners Group here in Nigeria. Partners, that's the key word to all of this. The partnership that we have among all of the education stakeholders with whom we work is really so important to each of us. And that is where we make a lot of progress, and sometimes we make mistakes, but we also look to rectify those mistakes and move forward. And we thank you for bearing with us as we stumble at times. And along the way, we make tremendous strides as well. What we all share is a tremendous passion for education, a commitment to mission, and meeting Nigerian goals for the education sector. We have seen reforms such as policy changes, practical improvements such as in budgeting or in interactive teacher training. We've seen curriculum advances such as the introduction of social and emotional learning in the Kanuri language, and many more. Most importantly, we're seeing improved learning outcomes, and that's why we're all here. So thank you so much for allowing us to partner with you. I must recognize all of the bilateral and multilateral organizations who form the EDPG with me. We meet every month, the first Wednesday of the month, and we're in touch throughout. You may all be aware that we have created the Education Matters newsletter, which we put out quarterly. We anticipate having the 6th issue come out in early December. So please look forward to that for updates on what the partners have been working on. Thank you for allowing us to partner with you. Thank you for inviting me here today, and best wishes for a very successful Nigeria Annual Education Conference 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, for that short message, which is very welcoming. We also want to take the next paper on cross-cutting issues by Dr. Joe Abba. Dr. Joe Abba is the country director, DIA, which is a program of FCDO, DFID, and is giving us a presentation on cross-cutting issues in the education sector. Dr. Joe Abba, you are welcome.
Thank you, Falaka. Good morning, everyone. Honorable Minister, PAMSEC, ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for inviting me to speak very briefly on some of the key issues around education. As Falaka said, I am the country director for DAI. DAI is not a program. DAI is a company, an international development company that works in more than 100 countries around the world. What I'm going to talk to you about today are the various cross-cutting themes and how they interrelate to each other. But beyond that, what we can do about them. And I'm just going to share my screen. It works. Can the host please share my presentation? I seem to be having a difficulty doing so. Can you see my screen, please? Okay, that seems to be okay. Let me try again. Sorry about this.
Dr. Joe Abba, you can actually go ahead. We'll put on your presentation right now.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. So I'm going to be looking at the evidence, the experience, the connectivity, and the future of some of these cross-cutting issues that I'm here to talk about. And these are the issues that act as binding constraints in the education sector. And I'm going to be talking about 4 in particular: the issue of capacity development of educators in a technology-driven education system, partnerships.
It looks like you have muted yourself. Oh. Can you try to unmute your... unmute yourself because we at this end, you are free. From your system, you can unmute yourself.
I'm actually unmuted. Can you hear me?
Well.
Can you hear me now? Hello? Hello, can you hear me? I'm not on mute. Can you hear me now, moderator? Oh dear. Hello, can you hear me? That's a shame. Can you hear me in the hall, please? Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. So I was talking about the issues of capacity, partnerships, the problem with funding, and then issues of governance, and the related issues of responsibility and accountability in the nation's education system. I'm going to go straight to the issue of capacity. So in each of these sub-themes I'm going to talk about, I'll talk about what the problems are, what the evidence is that some of these problems can actually be tackled, and then what we need to do in the future. So with regards to capacity, over 45% of Nigeria's population is age 15 or below. But the average ratio of pupils to qualified teachers is often more than 100 to 1. A major issue is the capacity of the individuals that actually apply to join the teaching profession. It seems to be a profession that is joined by people who cannot get other jobs. And so we need to think about how to make the teaching profession more attractive for the right caliber of people to come in and teach. Then there is the quality of training that teachers receive, the extent to which in-service training equips the teacher with the appropriate knowledge and skills to be able to do their jobs efficiently and effectively. Then there is on-the-job support. So what kind of support and to what extent does that support go in ensuring that teachers receive in-post training, including mentoring, and are therefore equipped to do their jobs well? And then the issues of teacher motivation and morale, including pay. And I'm quite pleased that the federal government has taken the decision to increase the salaries of teachers. We also need to work on ensuring that teachers have a conducive working environment in which to teach. What has been our experience and what's the evidence? Well, the FCDO and UNICEF Reading and Numeracy Activity program called RANA build the capacity of local government school support officers to collect classroom level data on tablets. And in 2018, the Zamfara Sube procured 120 tablets, trained 120 school support officers, and adopted their own server, expanding and sustaining a technology-driven system, which is very, very apt in the times that we are currently in. From 2017, Kaduna State supported several FCDO programs to improve teacher recruitment and training. It introduced a new education policy, which included better recruitment, increased teacher salaries, particularly in rural areas, and moved the salary payment function from local government to state government to ensure that there are no salary arrears and that salaries are paid fully and on time. In the future, we need to look again at the curriculum to make sure that the curriculum is fit for purpose and fit for today's world. We need to build teacher capacity for data-driven decision-making. We need to use technology more, particularly for diagnosis, for applied education delivery. And we need to apply learning to improve capacity to deliver improved education. And some of these issues were touched on by Chris Pycroft as the issues that the FCDO PLANE program will focus on. In terms of partnerships, Nigeria has the highest number of out-of-school children in the world, and the marginalized groups include girls, persons with disability, Majorai, and the very poor who suffer the most from this exclusion. Partnerships are insufficiently developed. We're not working well together across the 3 tiers of government, with development partners, with the private sector, with the non-formal sector, with teachers, with parents and pupils. You'll be aware of the popular African saying that it takes a village to educate a child. And this village needs to come together, put hands together to educate our children. There are also constitutional issues around the concurrency between the 3 tiers of government, which serve as a constraint on partnerships. We may well want to consider how to navigate through this, and I'll talk about that in the next slide or so. There are also issues affecting performance between UBEC, SUBEB, and the local government education authorities. In terms of our experience and evidence of partnerships, in Kano, the FCDO PEARL program supported an expanded partnership which identified education as one of the most important issues to deal with. And in 2019, the governor launched his free and compulsory basic and post-education program, which provided free primary and secondary education to every child, particularly the marginalized and vulnerable children and girls, and also integrated the Almajiri and Shangaya schools into a conventional education system. The FCDO UNICEF RANA activity also expanded basic education to more than 2,000 integrated Quranic schools in Northwest Nigeria. And with only 2 maths classes and 2 literacy classes a week, it was able to expand partnerships into improved oral reading fluency by 12 words per minute and math scores by 140%, particularly benefiting children that would otherwise have been out of school. For the future, we need to improve this integration between informal partnerships and formal partnerships. We need to provide flexible education options for out-of-school children to make sure that they're able to learn. We need to reform intergovernmental partnerships across the 3 tiers of government. And when I worked in the UK many years ago, we developed a system called shared priorities, where the central government and the local government signed up to certain priorities with for which they will allocate agreed resources. They will provide agreed financial and human resources to drive that particular activity forward. And this is something we may need to consider through the National Council on Education, where the 3 tiers of government actually sign up to a number of shared priorities. We need to train teachers and communities across the board to ensure there's access to quality education for girls and children living with capabilities. And we need to take seriously our commitment to education and consider embedding a mutual accountability framework that holds partners, both government and development partners, accountable for performance against commitments, which should include education for both out-of-school children and those that are otherwise excluded. Funding is always a problem, and Nigeria proportionately spends less on education than most other African countries. The proportion of total expenditure on education, in both at the federal level and in most states, failed to meet the 26% UNESCO recommendation. And the shares of the budgets and the actual expenditures against the budgets have actually been declining and took a further hit as states have had to reformulate their budgets in light of the decreased funding as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And education expenditure across the three tiers of government remain complex and significantly underperforms. We also have states that have failed to access over 22 billion naira, half of the total amount available from UBE, the UBE Intervention Fund in 2019 alone. And we need to reflect on this, because if states are accessing the World Bank SIFTAS program, and they were accessing the MDG conditional grant scheme, and they are partnering with the SDGs on the conditional grant scheme, why are they not accessing the UBEC intervention funds? This is something I think we need to think about very carefully and find a way to make that, to increase the level of access to the intervention funds. Our experience and evidence, we've of course supported a number of states. Kano is an example. Our support to them in 2018 saw the state allocate 29% of its budget to education, which is actually above the UNESCO target. And it didn't just allocate more money, it actually released a substantial amount, 76% was released. So yes, there is more to do, but this was a substantial, significant improvement from what it was before. In Kano, Kaduna, and Jigawa, RANA provided technical support to state governments who have committed to printing education materials and training teachers. In Taraba, Adamawa, and Borno, state governments actually replicated improved education services based on lessons from RANA, completely independent of project support and donor funding. And this we must do more of. For the future, I've talked about building partnerships. We need to do more on public-private partnerships as well. We need to explore expanding instruments such as the World Bank Better Education Services for All program, and building in performance-based grants like SIFTAS and mutual accountability frameworks. We need to reform the operation of UBEC and the Universal Basic Education Intervention Funds, and make sure that, as has happened in Kaduna and a few other places, funds actually reach the local government. And again, this is something that the federal government has made an effort to ensure happens. We need to improve planning and budgeting procedures. We need to work with state governments to build capacity around education expenditure and ensure that budgets are actually aligned to real needs. We need to promote transparency and accountability and increase expenditure on technology enabling systems, which could actually save money elsewhere. And yes, the COVID-19 pandemic has been devastating, but it has also meant that a number of things that had to be done face-to-face in the past can now be done remotely. Finally, in terms of governance, we have half of Nigerian children aged between the ages of 6 and 16 that cannot read. 86% of children in the lowest economic quintile can't do simple mathematics. That's a problem we're facing. Some of these include an absence of linkage between medium-term strategies and policies. A number of policies, good policies exist, but implementation has always been and continues to be a challenge. DAI recently did a study for the FCDO on girls' education, particularly in Kano and Kaduna, and found evidence of policies which are not being implemented and did not have clear implementation strategies or methods for making sure that they are put in place. Strong governance requires linking policies, strategies, executed budgets human resources, and the public service, monitoring and evaluation, learning and knowledge management, and working together. And one weak link breaks the chain and makes achievements much more difficult. We've seen evidence that this is possible. The education reforms in Kano, Kaduna, and Jigawa states have strengthened policies such that there are clearer systems and processes in place for training and recruiting teachers. Policies are now better linked to budgets. In Katsina and Zamfara, Rana worked with state governments to draft a Hausa reading implementation guideline because there's ample evidence that if people can read first in their mother tongues, it becomes easier for them to read in other tongues. And the work that one of our programs, Spark, did saw an increase in 12.1% in terms of aggregate budgets for education, as well as better execution of those budgets. For the future, again, consider the idea of shared priorities, look at avenues like the Open Government Partnership, put in place mutual accountability frameworks, build on the President's June 12 declaration on education, link inclusive education-based strategies to budgets, promote collaboration and partnership over silos, and improve the teacher recruitment, deployment, and performance management process. Finally, I'll just bring to your attention John Cotter's 8 steps to delivering change. So the first is to create a sense of urgency, and the problems we have in education are urgent in nature. To build a guiding coalition, so make sure that the private sector, governments across the 3 tiers, parents, teachers, local governments, state governments, everybody works together as a coalition, form a strategic vision and set out initiatives, enlist a volunteer army, he's called it, for people who are genuinely interested and committed in education. Enable action by removing barriers. If we need to change the constitution to make things more straightforward, let us do so. Let us make sure that the Universal Basic Education Intervention Fund works better than it is at the moment. Generate short-term wins to build confidence, sustain acceleration, and institute change. Specifically, make sure that we're using even the limited resources we have better than we are currently, strengthen the use of technology, promote partnerships and institutional reform, make sure we learn lessons and hold ourselves mutually accountable, and develop inclusive evidence-based policies implemented through budgets and human resources. I apologize if I've taken longer than normal. I also apologize for the technological glitches, but I hope that you've been able to follow my presentation. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Before we take the next speaker, we've seen that Dr. Joe Abba has taken us through a lot of cross-cutting issues that border on planning, why we need to do proper planning, issues that border on capacity building, on transparency and accountability, and doing things differently. He also spoke about funding issues, doing things purposively, and then on governance issues, where we need to do proper policy making that are targeted at getting results. And he rounded up by telling us about how to bring about change rapidly. 8 very quick steps. Thank you. We're going to be sharing the presentation to all of us that have registered via email. Thank you very much. So we go without taking much of our time to the next presentation We are having the lead paper presentation by Mr. Albert Insengimvia, who is the Executive Secretary of the Association of the Development of Education in Africa, ADEA. He's presenting virtually as well. He's in Ivory Coast, and we are set. If you are, Albert, thank you. Media, please.
Hello. Hello. Good morning. Good morning. I'm sorry I could not make it to Abuja for this important events. And I've been trying to connect using my laptop that I don't know what's going on. So I'll be able to use my mobile and share a few thoughts. Let me first thank the organizer of this event. I know it has been happening here, and ADEA has always been participating in this important event. So I have 3 or 4 important things as part of my paper to share. Number one is the current challenge that actually suggests to deliver inclusive and equitable quality education in a COVID-19 environment with technology as a key enabler. We definitely need to use activating out-of-box policies and strategies to turn the crisis into an opportunity. And we can actually see a number of good practices around this. The second is also the need for partnership. And we have seen this happening in many cases and in many countries. We have good examples from countries where private sector has worked closely with the education system to support delivering of education remotely. So just to give you an example, for example, in Mauritius, there was a good coverage using television, mobile phones, and other means to continue to communication during COVID time. The same happened to countries Ivory Coast, where the telcos were able to establish what is known as particularly to learners and this has really contributed heavily into delivering education during the COVID time. Of course, one also needs to acknowledge that the access to particularly to connectivity is one of the biggest challenges that we have faced, particularly in remote areas. So in some countries were able to use, of course, we all understand radios or have some, so there's no way you can actually have images that can support delivering education. Particularly as referred to my previous presenters, the issue of learning poverty, particularly to early learners. Reports have clearly shown that unless we are able to address literacy and numeracy for early learners, this has become one of the critical issues. And there are a number of efforts that are going on. So there's a great initiative that ADEA is engaging with the World Bank and other countries, including Nigeria, to facilitate, on one side, setting up learning assessment particularly for early learners, and also use technology to try and much as possible to establish systems that will actually continue supporting early learners while in school. As part of the national strategies for remote learning in place, there are mixed results, to be honest. Some countries have done so well, as I said before, because of the challenges associated with technologies. But there are countries that have managed to innovate in terms of establishing platforms to facilitate access to learning materials. Nigeria being one of the countries that have established this high-tech system in place. The critical issue is to make sure that access to that platform can actually be made available to remote places where connectivity is still a big issue. We also need to acknowledge for such a platform to succeed and be able to provide opportunities to as many learners as possible, there is a need to facilitate access to devices. And this is where the partnership again with the private sector becomes so important. In this perspective, just to give you an example of what the countries, a few countries have done, like in Ivory Coast, they managed to come up with 800 downloadable digital lessons that were produced by teachers under supervision with 2,000 connections per day. So call center set up to support learners was also a very critical thing that happened. In Madagascar, there is a self-study booklet in 3 basic subjects, particularly in technical and vocational education exams, classes, in addition to radio and TV lessons. While in Mauritius, there were 14 public training centers have used digital platform to deliver 29 theoretical TVET courses ranging from national certificate to higher. As far as higher education is concerned, examples that we can see happening, so for example, in Ivory Coast, there was a course broadcasting system supported by Virtual University of Abidjan. Alternative courses via Microsoft Teams for teachers and learners, and in-seat subgroup learners cohort. In Mali, there were 55 online lessons, as the same in Ghana, Rwanda have e-learning platforms. So there's this proliferation of e-learning platforms happening in a number of countries, which I think will be a good thing to emulate, as long as countries are able to address the issue of connectivity and access to devices. There were some also cases where in the current situations, where there were recording cases of domestic violence and other aspects that countries were able to handle, particularly in relation to addressing the gender mutilation and increased household costs. And those are some of the challenges that we're seeing during this COVID-19. There's therefore a need to make sure countries can come up with conducive policies to support girls' education and mitigate any challenges associated with some mistreatment that we have seen in a number of countries. The other aspect, of course, that we need to consider is the issue of additional financial support, particularly in this crisis, to address this crisis management framework. So largely from a national stimulus or special funds, as well as external resources will definitely be needed for most of the countries in order to be able to address the ongoing crisis, particularly in education system. Because the next thing that is going to be critical not only will be to strengthen the operation of the education system, but also to make sure that there's a well-being dimension that is taken into consideration moving forward. Now, the reopening of schools is happening now. A number of countries are reopening. Of course, this required the change in mindset, and more importantly, making sure that the school not only provide learning opportunities, but also is safe and have some minimum public health facilities to support learners, not only for the well-being, but also to prevent any crisis to come in the future. So they need to be resilient and establish systems in place to support that will definitely be very important. In terms of recommendations, some of the things that we were looking at as countries as we move forward, I think it's really important that schools are equipped with standard and norms to support remote learning. I think when you consider what happened during COVID, even though a number of countries were able to initiate remote learning, there were no clear policies, there were clear standards in place to support the delivery of remote learning using technology. And one of the things that are there is establishing is actually what we call a benchmarking toolkit that could actually support countries to make sure that whatever they do in terms of remote learning using technology meets a minimum standard in place. And this is something that we are prepared to share with countries in this regard. The other thing that we are doing as a DAEA, which I think will also benefit most of the countries, is actually the establishment of an observatory on COVID-19 responses in educational system in Africa. The COVID-19 has shown that countries were not properly prepared to address some of the critical issues. It has actually even exacerbated some of the challenges that countries were facing in education. And we believe that with the lessons that came out of the COVID, there were some good practices, there are policies in place, there are strategies that countries need to actually learn from. The observatory is a one-stop shop that will actually support countries in delivering some examples of good practices that countries have actually come up with to address COVID-19 pandemic impact in education system in particular. We will also be looking at research that have been conducted in a number of countries, looks especially on evidence to inform policymakers as they try to overcome the challenges and issues associated with COVID-19. The observatory will be launched on 17 November, which is next week, and we hope that the Ministry of Education in Nigeria will actually be able to participate. This is going to be a virtual meeting. The other thing that we are doing as well is really supporting technical and vocational education system. This is a subsector that were left behind during COVID-19 because of the complexity of delivering TVET using technology. In this perspective, we've actually conducted a study to look at really how to include digital technology in delivering technical vocational education and training. And this is something we are working together with a number of private companies, providers of technology. We have already identified a number of areas that actually can bring up innovative solutions to support the delivery of technical vocational education training, not only to facilitate access, but also to improve the quality and relevance. And this is what we call digitalization of technical and vocational education and training. We are organizing a colloquium, an online colloquium on the 26th November, where we'll be bringing private companies that have come up with solutions to support technical vocational and countries as the demand is there to see how both can actually interact and be able to use some of these innovative solutions in support of the technical vocational education and training. Lastly, as far as higher education is concerned, we've just completed a study that is actually looking at how universities are dealing with COVID-19 in terms of delivering access, quality, and more importantly, addressing some of the gaps that we see in the labor market. The intention here is to be able to come up with a strategic framework that will support universities in terms of advancing on the continental strategic framework, particularly in relation to the use of technology again, but more importantly, the strengthening of research, as we believe universities need to keep really addressing research and build capacity in the research. As you can see during COVID-19, Africa was really missing in terms of addressing some of the key issues that are associated with COVID-19. So I think it's really a high time for our universities to play their part and be visible around the globe in terms of contributing to research and findings that can support countries to address COVID-19 and the consequences associated with it. So in brief, this is really what I want to share with you. It's unfortunate I couldn't actually be able to present, but I will be able to engage with you during the question and answers. Thank you.
System for our great nation, Nigeria. Education is a central cohesive source of support and stability in the development of any nation, and is the best legacy a country can bequeath to its citizens. Education derives from the commonality of its people and drives economic progress. It sustains development and ensures lasting peace. Nigeria's education system must be effective, resilient, and sustainable, as well as prepare our citizens for the responsibilities of citizenship and national development. It must prepare Nigerian youths to be self-reliant and take competitive advantage of the current century knowledge-driven, innovative-driven, and digital technology-driven economy within and outside our country. The theme of this conference is a true reflection of an unusual global challenge faced by education in recent days. The emergence of the coronavirus pandemic, COVID-19, has no doubt adversely affected the education sector and the economy at national and global levels. The pandemic has forced schools and
if you want to. Switch it off or look away. While we sit, we talk and talk, we talk some more. Someone's loved one's heart stops beating in a street somewhere. So we would see we've still got a long, long way to go. I know I've heard all I wanna hear today. Turn it off if you want to. Switch it off, switch some coffee, look away. Turn it off if you want to. Switch it off, switch it look away. Switch it off. like a rainbow. Show me a smile. Don't be unhappy, can't remember when. Unless so you're laughing. If this one makes you crazy and you're taking all you can bear, just call me up because you know I'll be there. And I'll see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show just your true colors. True colors are beautiful, ooh, like a rainbow. Such sad eyes. Take courage now. Realize when this world makes you crazy and you're taking all you can bear, just call me up because you know I'll be there. And I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show just your true colors. True colors, true colors are shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid, just let them show your true colors. True colors, true colors are beautiful, beautiful like a rainbow. Yeah, 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 yeah. Show me your colors. Show me your colors. Show me
Hello? Hello?
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, participants, the tea break is over. The tea break is over. We're calling the conference to order. Can we all return to our seats so that we all return to our seats so that we can invite the Honorable Minister and the Permanent Secretary who are waiting outside to come in for proceedings to commence for the technical session. Please be seated. We're about to commence proceedings for the technical session, the panel discussion. Please, distinguished participants, return to your seats. Thank you very much. I think we are now very much we bring back the Honorable Minister and the Permanent Secretary so that we can commence proceedings. I appreciate it.
Sometimes spins too fast and you not only lose your balance, but you lose your rhythm. And it's at times like these that you just need to stop.
Imagine
is something I can give in exchange for everything you give to me. Read my mind, you make me feel just fine. When I think my peace of mind is out of reach, the scales are sometimes unbalanced, and you bear the weight of all that has to be. I hope you see that you can lean on me, and together we can calm the stormy seas. When love's so strong and so unselfishly, and I tell you now that I made a vow, I'm giving you the best that I've got, baby. Yes, I tell you now that I made a vow, I'm giving you the best that I've got, honey. Everybody's got opinions about the way they think our story's gonna end. Some folks feel it's just a superficial thrill. Everybody's gonna have to think again. We've loved so strong and so unselfishly. They don't bother me, so I'm gonna keep on giving you the best that I got, baby. They don't bother me, said I'm gonna keep on giving you the best that I got. Listen, baby, somebody understand me. Somebody gave his hand to me. I stumbled my whole life long, always on my own. Now I'm home, and my weary mind is rested, and I feel as if my home is in your arms. My fears are all gone, I like the sound of your song, and I think I wanna sing it forever. We love is so strong and so unselfishly, and I made a vow, so I tell you now I'm giving you the best that I got. Listen, baby, I bet everything on my wedding ring. I'm giving it to you, baby.
Un peu froid.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the permanent secretary is back to the house and we are taking up straight away. Please be seated. Be seated. Let us commence proceedings for the second segment, the technical session of this conference. Can we please have one house? Can we have one house? Please return to your seats. The permanent secretary is back to the house. I would like to very respectfully invite the chairman for this segment, the permanent secretary, Federal Minister of Education, Architect Sonny Echana, for the opening remarks and continuation of the conference. The permanent secretary, sir.
The Honorable Commissioners for Education, states, chief executives of parastatals in the education sector, state permanent secretaries, directors of the ministry, representatives of all the ministries here present, our development partners, distinguished participants. Again, on behalf of the minister, I welcome you to this technical session. And I also crave your indulgence that the Minister of State and myself have just been invited to a meeting with the Senate President for 2 o'clock. So I am going to be very brief and brisk with this business. Productivity and creativity, promotes entrepreneurship and technological advancement, and provide them the tools to access the opportunities from their environment. Not only to create value and earn returns or a living for themselves, but also contribute to the overall economic growth of the country. Today, we are in the 4th industrial revolution, what is popularly referred to as the knowledge economy. And this is powered essentially by education in whatever form that you look at. A key driver of this is science and information and communications technology. So you are going to be hearing about concepts such as artificial intelligence, big data, robotics, quantum data analytics, automation, nanotechnology, biotechnology, and all other forms of knowledge that operates within the larger frame of innovation, creativity. And the pace of development in these sectors are a lot faster than the traditional modes that we've become accustomed to from our experience. So the mode of teaching, learning, will have to adjust and change with these new and expanding possibilities. Training and capacities in science, technologies, engineering, and mathematics have now become more critical than before. And education based on science and ICT will shape the nature of work as well as the job opportunities of tomorrow. So, mercifully, especially during the pandemic, saying about digital literacy. And we have most of our schools today battling with those challenges. Even where they exist, being able to pay for subscription, being able to ensure that open learning resources are constantly available is a challenge. And this is part of a team that we, as policymakers, as stakeholders, should begin to look at. Our ability to switch from our conventional to online platforms will continue to be a challenge, and our students will face these difficulties unless we take drastic measures to fundamentally restructure our economy and to prioritize those basic things, getting things done properly. With an education that is already burdened with challenging participation and learning achievements, we heard from many of the speakers earlier today. Even when we record successes in bringing our kids to school, in enrollment, in providing access, you have to look at the quality. What is happening in those schools? Are they learning? We have received reports where in some institutions, in many states, when they launch the school reading program, kids come in because they want to access free lunch. But immediately after lunch, they all disappear, or they basically. Then we have the monster of unqualified teachers. Students even know more than the teacher. It becomes a challenge. There have been many times when teachers are given exercises for students and they themselves are unable to solve those problems or to answer correctly such questions. So you can imagine the damage is de-learning. This is what we call de-learning. I may know the answer, but because my teacher taught me the wrong thing, I am now forced to accept sudden shift from the classroom in many parts of the globe these days. Some are wondering whether the adoption of online learning will continue to persist post-pandemic and how such a shift would impact the worldwide education market. While some believe that the unplanned and rapid move to online learning with no training, insufficient bandwidth, and little preparation will result in a poor user experience that is unconducive to sustained growth, but others believe that a new hybrid model of education will emerge with significant benefits, and I belong to that latter category. I believe that the integration of information technology in education will be further accelerated, and that online education will eventually become an integral component of our school system. It is a future we must embrace with courage, with hope, and with enthusiasm. So, dear participants, let me point out that the new impetus on moving to online learning will be used as a catalyst to create a new and more effective method of educating students. The policymakers and stakeholders are enjoined to put on their thinking caps to chart the way for making e-learning part of the key methods of educating students in Nigeria. It is therefore incumbent on all of us to explore its full potential. I should also point out that innovations and the placement of high premium on education systems driven by technology, whose products are employable by modern industries and settings, is the way forward. And what do I mean by this? We should begin to focus on education that is purposive, that is directed at a purpose. We should build national consensus on where we want our country to be. We should cultivate a culture of planning. And that's why we are working together with sister ministries under an effort led by the Ministry of Labor and Productivity to determine repatriate part of it to come and develop their country. And today, if you look at the top 7 out of the top 10 IT companies in the world are being managed by India, people of Indian origin or descent. They have seized that space. On 2 or 3 occasions that I visited India in the last 3 years, I can't help but marvel, because I was there long before, and they were not even at our level at all 15, 20 years ago, as recent as that. But now you go to many areas, they tell you they are employing, Oracle is employing 115,000 here, Microsoft 100 and something thousand people working for them, doing outsourced work.
Ngiyuma to do a recap of the lead paper he presented to us earlier in the day. No, we're coming to that, sir. We will do a recap of the lead presentation. We'll be giving 3 minutes to Dr. Albert to do that recap, and then we'll break into the various groups for our technical work. I invite once again my co-anchor, Dr. Davies. Madam, at the end of the recap, Dr. Davies will now make some announcement on the various technical groups, and we proceed from there. Once again, Dr. Albert Ngiyuma, you're welcome from Côte d'Ivoire for a recap of your presentation, sir.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity again to recap on my earlier presentation. Let me quickly go through a couple of points that I think are
Dr.
very
Abbas,
important.
you have the center stage. Please proceed with the recap.
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Very well.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Yeah, yeah. So, let me summarize on a few points that for such an important conference. I think I will start by permanent secretary. A few points that you made to the education for the African 63. Most critically, I think most of countries have education, which is so important. Of course, there are still room for particularly in relation to gender dimension, making sure that our girls are protected and are educated at the same level. The critical issue is there to position education to the current world's made technology as a peer what we call the digitalization or the fourth industrial revolution. I think it's really important to so much that education needs to do from our curriculum, the teacher professional development, the learning assessment, and also making sure that wherever learners. So in this regard, there are three important strategies that we need. Number one is the peer learning and knowledge in countries. And this is something that they are because we cannot have the African continental free trade unless countries collaborate to address education. This is really the foundation. The second is really the need to the key stakeholders, particularly connecting with the private development partners and the social and the civil. And the third and most is to make our education and for this to happen, we need to make sure that play, education, policy, program, and delivery. And we have seen some models that we can learn from. If you look at what is happening in particularly in countries like Taiwan, South Korea, I think there are so much we can learn how we can properly adapt context. So the key issue is therefore, how do we reform our education to make it more future needs of our country? This is where I see the importance, including utilizing resources, but basic revenues in different countries, in Nigeria in particular. The other aspect that you need to raise the issue of in our education. We have seen a number of education that have come up with innovative using technology to promote training. Again, Nigeria has basis to study. There are some young people that put innovative solutions, technologies. The issue is therefore support them so that they can help their initiative. Make sure that approach. Of course, I cannot really end about talking about COVID-19 pandemic. I think we have seen the first. I think those were really good to make sure that we integrate not only to address impact, but more importantly to for any price to come. And that's where definitely norms and promoting remote learning, including aspect of to use technology, aspect of making sure that available and affordable, and more importantly, learning assessment, so that we can tell improving in terms of. So in brief, these are my few remarks and that I wanted to share during this important conference. And I thank you again for the opportunity to share my presentation.
I work for an organization called Back to Basics Education Initiative. I think that the presentation did not completely do justice to the Nigerian environment, because the statistics were shown did not feature mostly on what we have done in Nigeria. And for the size that we occupy in Africa, and for the fact that this presentation is being made to Nigeria audience, we should have had a bit more of the results from Nigeria, especially during the COVID session. Having said that, I think also that as practitioners and policymakers in the room, we didn't get the opportunity to make contributions to some of the critical issues that were raised during the first sessions in the morning. And the essence of a conference like this
on existing protocols. I'm Lydia Onoha, working for the USAID funded Northern Education Initiative Plus, which focuses on access and improving reading outcomes in states in Nigeria. My concern has to do with, but first of all, I'd like to appreciate the presenter for the presentation. My concern has to do with, is a bit cool, and that has to do with the learning loss during the COVID pandemic period, and steps that needs to be taken practically to help bridge the gap, because learners have actually lost a lot. And I think that the outcome of this conference will be to help channel or chart practical ways, practical activities that all stakeholders will take to bridge the learning gap. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I guess that is for all of us to brainstorm on. I don't know if Albert wants to say a word before we go on to our time.
Hello? Hello?
Albert, please. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. I think I followed the important point made. Indeed, they are really learning that most of the countries have experienced. And that's why they need revitalization, particularly looking at learning assessment. Of course, this call for professional, because I still believe technology, but we need to make sure that teachers they have the knowledge to allow them and also to be able to particularly using what is known. This is something that most of the. So I really wanted to support the intervention of in relation to how learning losses COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Albert. I hope that is well taken. We have learning poverty. There are issues about learning, which is even worsened by the current situation. So coupled with that, as we go on, a lot of issues, but then we are making progress in some ways, and there are things we can learn from other climes and what we are also doing in our country and what we can do further. So without much ado, thank you very much, everyone, for that brief session. We'll go into our different sessions, breakout rooms now. We have panel 1, which is strengthening the design of curriculum, assessment and monitoring systems. We have the panelists ready. Director EPR&D, you want to say something? Okay. Thank you very much. We have the panel 1, and there are ladies outside that will take us to our various rooms. The breakout rooms